My name is Clara Towson, and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
I am Francisca George, and I'm a friend of the show.
Perfect.
Hi, my name is Susan Leemans and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom. Yeah.
My name is Zainab Sammaz and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
Hey guys, my name is Sasha Vickery and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
Hi, my name is Lloyd Harris and I'm a friend of the show.
Perfect.
Hi, my name is Jan Faria and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
Yes.
Take one. Well done.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Paulini and I'm a friend of the show.
Wow, Jasmine, you got it in one time.
Ready? Play.
I was muted. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a little recap of the 2025 Wimbledon Wheelchair lineup. I'm joined by Gemma. How are you doing, Gemma?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm very, very good. Thank you. So up to you where you want to start, really. I mean, we've got a lot to go through. So where do you want to start? Should we start with the women's singles final?
Yeah, really exciting final, actually. They put it on court 3, which is one of the larger courts, which is great now to see wheelchair tennis on the larger courts at Wimbledon, and especially the finals weekend. All matches were played on either court 3 or court 1, which is a big step forward. The women's final between Kamiji and Wong. And and Wong came out victorious. I think her victory not only is a good victory for her and a really, really nice kind of, she's got hands on a Grand Slam singles title. To be fair, those of us that watched the tour have wondered how long it would take her, because she's kind of been knocking at those doors at all of the Grand Slams, really. But a really good advert for how China's investing in wheelchair tennis. So you'll notice, especially in the women's division, actually, if you look at the ITF rankings, you'll see a lot of Chinese women there now featuring in that top 10. There's not just Wong, there's Li, there's Zhen Zhenzu, who's been around for a while, but these others are now coming through. And also in the men's division, you've got Ji as well, who has been somebody that's been on people's radar, and he's now made it into the top 10. So it's really interesting to see these Chinese players now shine on the world stage, and the kind of investment that must be being given over there to get them at the top of the game. I think quite an emotional moment for her, but I mean, she's been knocking, like I say, she's been knocking at the door of Grand Slam titles for a fair bit now. She was somebody who I noticed at the Paralympics as well, in Paris 2024 last year as well, because she got quite far down. So now when we talk about the women's game, we talk about Japan, the Netherlands and China. It's not just Japan and the Netherlands now.
Well, yeah, it was a bit of a overcoming moment for Wang, because she's lost her last 8 against Kamiji, hadn't she? And Kamiji was obviously going for the career slam at Wimbledon. She's obviously won Australia, US and French multiple times, but this is a big moment for her, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And if you're going to get your first win over somebody in a long time, let it be in a Wimbledon final.
Wimbledon final, yeah, absolutely.
It's probably the best place to have it, because then you've got the trophy on. You've got that hands-on trophy. But yeah, no, for Yui, I think actually, watching her, grass has always been the surface that she hasn't been as dominant on. To see her make a final, to see her compete in the final was really, really good, because actually she has all the aspects of her game that makes her good. I say grass in doubles, she's always been very good on grass, especially when she used to play GB's Jordan Wiley. But in singles, it's kind of taken her a while to find her game. But actually, if we look at a lot of the wheelchair players, that's kind of a similar thing. I mean, we came into the first year of wheelchair singles at Wimbledon not kind of knowing who had the singles game for grass. And when out came Gordon Reed and Stefan Olsen, who had these beautiful slices and this beautiful game for grass. I think what's happened now is as the tour has grown. So in 2016, when we saw the first Wimbledon singles competed for, there were literally no grass court tournaments in the lead up. It was maybe a couple of days at Surbiton, and that was about it. And then they were kind of plonked on the Wimbledon grass, having no other tour events on grass. So what we've actually witnessed is how these players who have been successful on hard court, clay court, in wheelchair tennis, how they've adapted their game. And I think that's what's really interesting about Yui's journey to this final, is seeing how she's adapted her game. She had a great deal of success the week before Yui in Roehampton in the British Open in kind of the warm-up tournament.
Yes.
So see, it's what's really interesting is seeing over sort of the 9 years, it will be 10 years. So it was 20 years since we had our first wheelchair doubles at Wimbledon. It'll be next year, it'll be 10 years since we first had our wheelchair singles at Wimbledon. And over these 10 years, to see how players are adapting their game, and to see how actually the fact that now, 9 years on, we've got wheelchair tennis in the lead up to Wimbledon at Eastbourne, we've got an exhibition at Queen's, exhibition at Nottingham, we've got the British Open at Roehampton, and then we go into Wimbledon. So the opportunities to play on grass and to actually have a proper grass court season are there, and I think it's helping players a lot more.
Yeah, and it's good that we have that, right? Because if you want to, you have to try building the game, and without a build up to Wimbledon, then there's going to be such a small window for you to try improve the scale of the sport, right? So it's good that we now have that. That wasn't the only success for Wang. I guess she also won the doubles.
She won the doubles as well.
Yeah,
with
so
a partner, Lee.
great
yeah, she does the double in Wimbledon. Let's just say that. I mean, that was another really exciting final. The doubles partnerships actually in the women's draw are really, really exciting this year. And actually, I think in that doubles final, yes, Wong and Lee won it, but I think there's one player that we need to be talking about. So she's somebody who I know and I've watched play a number of times, but Ksenia Chesto, the French partner of Angelica Bernal. I kind of thought, because this was kind of her first Wimbledon, but I've seen her play for long, and I thought for a long time, and I thought, well, not a long time. She's not been playing. She's playing about 3 years, but since she's kind of started to go up the rankings, and I kind of thought she had a game that might be good for grass. Actually, I thought she's quite good with a slice. She's quite varied. It might work really, really nicely on that surface. Well, she drew the number 2 seed, Aniek van Colt, in the singles on the first day, admittedly, everybody was like, right, that's Aniek's to lose, but she played a blinder against her, and she really did use all the weapons she has available to her. And then that kind of, she made it a little way through the singles, but she did make it to the doubles final, and gave a really good account of herself. And she's not somebody who would be on a lot of people's radars. She does get wild cards for Roland Garros and stuff, but she wouldn't have been a person who'd been on a lot of great people's radars. And the impact she made at Wimbledon was fantastic. I had French journalists coming up to me going, who is this French woman in the draw who's made it to a doubles final? And so I think actually, yes, really celebratory. Again, says a lot about what China are doing for wheelchair tennis, how they're building their players up, particularly in the women's division. But I think also there's just a little bit of a rising Wimbledon star there in Chasteau. And I'd love to see, this was her first year at Wimbledon. There were going to be nerves and that come with your first kind of Wimbledon. But I really can't wait to see how she develops into a grass court player, because I think she's got everything she needs to do really well on this surface. And I think over the coming years, we should really be watching her. If she stays in that top 16, which she looks to be doing at the minute. So if she stays in that top 16 and cements herself in there, then I can't wait for another few Wimbledons of seeing her and seeing how she does.
Well, yeah, and you were talking earlier about the investment that China have been putting into wheelchair tennis, but might be a sort of like a start of the, you know, French wheelchair tennis kind of kicking on from where it is right now. I mean, you always have these leading figures that always start this sort of like jump in investment and the amount of players they have in the country, and hopefully this is a start for them, because, you know, she's obviously made the doubles final, and that's a huge achievement for her.
Yeah, I think potentially in the women's as well, because obviously in the men's you've always had Stefan Houdet, Nico Pfeiffer. You know, they've won doubles titles together. Michael Jeremias, who we were celebrating 20 years of wheelchair tennis at Wimbledon this year, and he was the first winner of the men's doubles alongside a British player, Giant Mystery. So they've always had a strong tradition in the men's game, and we've always seen a lot of their men come through and do really well on the Grand Slam stage. The women coming through, they have some really good women players. They have Emmanuel Morch, they have Ksenia, who we saw, you know, Charlotte Fairbank. They have some really, really good women's players. It's just they've not been able to crack that top 16. So, you know, it took for China, it took Zhen Zhenzhou to kind of really cement her place there. And then we started seeing more and more come forward. And maybe, because we're going to start seeing more French women, more French girls taking up the sport and kind of be a part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's also, sorry, I just want to go back to the women's final, singles final, sorry.
Yeah.
It's obviously, you talking about the investment that China are making. It's also China's first ever singles wheelchair slam, isn't it? So again, that's another huge landmark for China in their investment into the sport, and, you know, they're reaping the rewards now.
Yeah, and I think what we might see is, you know, as we see with the Dutch women, we hopefully we'll see kind of like a legacy build from this.
Yeah.
A legacy of investment, a legacy of more girls taking up the sport, more men taking up the sport, more quads taking up the sport in that country, and they're clearly doing something right. There's clearly something going right with the way they're coaching, with the way they're developing players, with the way they're finding players. So I think probably, I mean, it feels like ages ago, but maybe this is the real Paralympic legacy of Beijing coming forward. I mean, it feels silly to say that because that was early 2000s, but maybe it's taken this time to build. After they hosted the Paralympics, it's taken this time to build. And actually what they've done is they've not kind of rushed it and thought, oh, we have to have gold medal winning athletes within 4 years before the next cycle. They've kind of taken what they've learned maybe from Beijing and then developed players and pathways from that, which is a very positive thing. You know, not everything happens overnight.
Yeah, no. And, you know, no, as you say, nothing does happen overnight, but at this stage we can see that there's been clear progress now. So we're getting somewhere in a sense. If we want to move to the men, absolutely. Let's start with the singles. Another great addition of this kind of rivalry that's now been building for a couple of years now. This 19-year-old in Tokito Oda and Alfie Hewett. Obviously, Oda took this one. Hewett, obviously, home favorite, but 3-6, 7-5, 6-2. Another great match between these two, right?
Yeah, so it was a replay of the 2023 final. So last year, it wasn't Tokito and Alfie in the final because Martin de la Puente knocked Tokito out. Yeah. Martin de la Puente is a dangerous customer. If he's
Always.
he's found a purple patch, he's there, and you can't get on top of him. So so Tokito and Alfie, it's a rivalry that keeps on kind of giving, and what's really great about their rivalry is how it's kind of developed. So often when we kind of watched them at the beginning when they were playing each other, it would kind of be one person would kind of take the momentum and they would have it pretty much through the match, and it would be an easy kind of straight sets, whether that be Alfie or Tokito. I think the turnaround in their matches, even when it's only gone to 2 sets, came last year in Paris at that gold medal final, where it became so full of momentum shifts that it's now a regular thing that we're seeing when they take each other on. Actually, if you watch that final between Tokito and Alfie this year at Wimbledon, it did very much feel like the match was on Alfie's racket for about the first set and a half. And there was a moment where he could have gone ahead and probably then taken the second set in the match. But Tokito has this way. I mean, we saw it when earlier on in the draw he played another player from the UK and from Norfolk, actually, Ben Bartram. Ben Bartram found himself 5-2 up. So he was down a set, but he found himself 5-2 up against Tokito in the second set. And then Tokito then proceeded to do absolutely nothing wrong, to make absolutely no forced errors, to have no errors in his game. And he came back and won it in straight sets. So Tokito has this way of like knowing when to turn it on and to basically play a no error game. And I think that was it. And then errors did creep into Alfie's serve. So one of the talking points of this Wimbledon that I've had with Alfie is how his serve has improved. So if you look at Alfie's run up to this final, it looked pretty straightforward. And one of the reasons is because he's really worked on his serve, and he seems to have found that kind of nice balance with the serve. Because the thing about Alfie's game is previously you'd sometimes feel there was a lot of pressure on his return game. There was a lot of pressure on this return game, but he seems to have really worked on his serve with his coach Craig and his team. And it didn't feel like that at this year's Wimbledon. And it felt like actually, there was one match Alfie played where he served 9 aces. Now that is pretty much, I don't think I've, maybe once or twice I can count on one hand the number of times Alfie served that number of aces in a match, but it's not a regular thing for him, which showed the kind of development in his serve and how he's worked it. And actually at the beginning of that final, he said to me on the Friday when we knew that he was going to be playing Tokito, he's like, it's got to be first strike tennis. I've got to get the first kind of blow in. Because one thing you'll notice about the rallies between Alfie and Tokito, they don't tend to be that long.
No.
In the scheme of things, it's quite short rallies, maybe 4 or 5 shots. So the one that gets the first strike in generally is the one that will win that point. So Alfie played kind of pretty much that game plan. It's just Tokito read the game plan sort of like halfway through the second set, and then it became a lot tougher, and Tokito kind of upped his level as well. But Tokito actually in his press was very I think Tokito was in the opinion in his press conference that this was actually a more of a showcase of the sport than even the Paralympic final. So this final here at Wimbledon, he was very complimentary of Alfie and said, this was like a real showcase. This was really good. And then Alfie, of course, he was, finished with runners up all honors, but he made a very important point that actually when you looked out on court 1 where I was watching this, it was practically full. You're talking like 10,000 people was watching it. And and I was having a conversation. I was going out to do some radio bits and bobs at like change of ends and stuff, and I was having a conversation with a lady that it was a lady and a man, and they said, 2 years ago when we found out we got court 1 tickets, we were like, yes, and then we found out it was the wheelchair tennis, and we were like, oh, and then they're like, but now when we get court 1 tickets for this final Saturday, we're like, oh yes, it's the wheelchair tennis. It's that thing of changing perception by people seeing it. And when I heard that from somebody who'd kind of come just to watch the tennis, it was like, yes, putting wheelchair tennis on court 1, putting it there in front of the crowds, making it a spectacle the way that they did. That is changing perceptions, and people are now going, yes, I'm going to Wimbledon on the final Saturday and I'm going to go and watch one of the wheelchair tennis finals. To advance it, I'd love to see all of the wheelchair tennis finals eventually on court 1, because at the minute we had 2 on court 3 and 1 on court 1. I'd love to see Wimbledon kind of, because you have 3 each day. go, right, okay, we're scheduling all wheelchair tennis on court 1 for the Saturday and Sunday for finals weekend. I'd love to see that. And of course, the ultimate dream, one wheelchair tennis match on centre court, which when I interviewed Alfie afterwards, he was like, yeah, maybe at least one match in my career before I retire. But,
well, and he deserves it as well, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think we're getting there, and I think within the next, I talked a lot with the players that this is where we are after 20 years of wheelchair tennis at Wimbledon. Where could we be in the next 20, given the kind of rise? When Giant and Michael Jeremiah won the doubles title 20 years ago, they were playing an exhibition on like court 17. What the steps it's made in 20 years, what could the steps then be in another 20 years?
Yeah, and I mean, hopefully we have in 20 years this huge, even more progression. I mean, how far we've come, and then even further. We're always looking forward at that point. But just want to look at you were talking about how it's like you're changing perception of wheelchair tennis. Oda versus Hewett is as at the moment as big as it gets in wheelchair tennis, isn't it? And having the ability for that to be the final is just drawing more and more fans in.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of, that's always the proposed final, because obviously Tokito's world number 1, Alfie's world number 2, so they never at the minute, based on their rankings, actually the only time they could meet is in a final. So that we're kind of lucky with the rankings at the minute that they'll never meet.
They'll never meet. Yeah.
And obviously Martin's knocking on the door of that number 2 and stuff like that. So it will be interesting to see how that dynamic change, because then potentially you could have an Alfie and Tokito in the first round, which would be absolutely. It's like, what was that? There was a match in the men's this year at Wimbledon that was like, could have been a quarterfinal or a semi-final, but it was played in like round 1 or round 2, and in the main draw, and it would kind of be a bit like that. So right now we're kind of very lucky in that when people predict pathways, they'll always go, what's Tokito's pathway, what's Alfie's pathway? That's because of ranking there. So we still, but I mean, it is kind of the one that people want to see. But then there's equally, I think Gustavo Fernandez and Alfie is also a showstopper. Like the amount of, they're both players that wear their heart on their sleeve. So the amount of emotion that is in that match, and you go off court, like whether they play 2 sets or 3, you will walk off having watched that match feeling absolutely emotionally drained, because both of those players don't hide their emotions on court. Like, when they're annoyed with themselves, when they're ecstatic with themselves. So I think it's not just Alfie and Tokito in the men's draw. It's Alfie and Gusti. That's we didn't see it actually. So usually in Grand Slams, it's usually an Alfie versus Gusti semi-final, but Gusti ended up on the other side of the draw to Alfie. So I hear tell that they were both relieved, but that semi-final that seems to be happening at Grand Slams a lot between Gustavo Fernandez and Alfie, that's an incredible match to watch, an incredible display of tennis as well. So I think what we're seeing is in the wheelchair tennis is it's not just about one rivalry. There's so many more building up. And kind of there was a lovely first round match actually, which kind of rolled back the years a bit, where Gordon Reed took on Joachim Gerard, and they are 2 players who have played each other numerous times throughout the years on the tour, and that's always a lovely matchup in the men's draw, and it was just as competitive as I expected it to be, even though it was the first round of Wimbledon. And so there are little pockets of really, really good head-to-heads that kind of make you sit up and watch. I mean, the women's draw, actually, Yui and Dida became kind of the one to watch as well. But now I think with Li and Wong and Zhu from China in the mix there, and Anique now, really flying high in the rankings. There's some really nice women's head-to-heads coming in, and actually, it wasn't on Wimbledon. It was at Roehampton the week before in the quad division. There was a Brit, Greg Slade. He's I've known him since he was a junior. He's kind of worked his way up in the rankings, and he got a wild card for Wimbledon this year. So he played Roehampton, and I tell you what, he took on Sam Schroeder. Nobody was expecting to be still sat on that court 2.5 hours later, but we were, because and I can see that as Greg kind of develops more experience on the world stages, I can actually see Greg getting closer and closer to Sam Schroeder, because at Roehampton he was a 7-5 love up against Sam Schroeder. Now, partly then Sam Schroeder turned his game up, but then partly Greg did Greg. And a number of matches I've sat in with Greg Slade where he's been a set and something up, just literally serving for the match, and then it's gone. But and that kind of confidence that somebody like Greg, who's just coming in, he's now ranked number 7 in the world, which means we knew he would be at the US Open before he did Wimbledon, but this kind of being in the top 7 as well, because we need to not forget that in the quad division, so in the men's and open division, they have 16, but in the quad division at both Wimbledon and Roland Garros still, it's only 7 plus a wild card. So to really play in all 4 Grand Slams, if you're in the quad division, you need to be in that top 7. And he had a big Greg in the quad division had a big singles win in the quarterfinals of the quads, where he beat Francisco Kovalev to make it through to the semi-final, where he played Sam Schroeder. I think what happened there is, so when I watched it in Roehampton, Greg had developed his serve and his game to be more in keeping with what needs to be on the grass. He worked on his placement. He'd worked on, how he constructs the points. And Sam had a real problem with reading, especially the serve. But then he kind of got to grips with Greg's serve in that semi-final at Wimbledon, in that single semi-final. But he had also played him in a double semi-final the day before. So he'd had a lot of exposure then to Greg's game and how Greg plays, because obviously Greg made it to the Wimbledon final as well. That's another one. First Wimbledon. Well, it wasn't. It was actually his second Wimbledon, because he did compete in Wimbledon in 2023. But his second Wimbledon, and made it to quad doubles final. So there's all these new names starting to come out, and all these potential head-to-heads that could be kind of showstoppers that people want to watch. It's good to see, because it shows how the game's developing and how the competitiveness is developing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what you want, right, for a sport that's constantly growing.
Yeah.
Moving on to the men's doubles final, it was Hewett again. Hewett and Reed going for number 24 versus, I don't want to botch pronunciation. So if you want to pronounce, I'll mess this up so bad.
Yeah. Oh no. It's Martin de la Puente and Ruben Spargaran. Both really good doubles players. Partnership we have seen before on tour. Knew they were dangerous. Martin just wasn't missing anything that day. And I'm going to say it, there's some of the shots that you thought Martin was going to hit. Like, I was there again on court 1 for that match. There's some shots you thought Martin was hitting and you were like, that's blatantly going out. And it would just drop on the baseline.
Yeah.
And you were like, no, that's a good shot. So Martin had a very, very good day that day. That was like Martin. And I think he needed to have that day, because I think a lot of people underestimated him, because I remember I was in the press office and a lot of people were seeing the matchup. And the day previous, Alfie had played him in singles, and there was obviously that 6-love first set in that singles semi-final. Now, you don't get a 6-love set against Martin very often. Even Alfie was surprised at that 6-love set. And I think then a lot of people in the press room had assumed that this was going to be easy for Gordon and Alfie because of that singles match. And I spent like my whole morning explaining that singles is very different to doubles.
Doubles, yeah.
And also that single semi-final that first set wasn't Martin at his best. That was not the Martin de la Puente that we can see that we see on the tour year round. So I said, just beware, 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 because when Martin gets into a stride, he is dangerous as anything.
Yeah.
And in that final, he just was not missing anything. It was just, no tennis player is going to say they're a perfect game of tennis, but he was quite near to it.
Yeah.
And obviously Ruben, his partner, played a really, really big part in that as well, because Ruben is a really good doubles player. He's been in the Grand Slams a couple of times now, and yeah, he really supported Martin as well, and really gave us some really lovely moments too. He hit some lovely drop shots in that final. And what they tended to be doing with Gordon and Alfie is kind of keeping them behind the baseline. So what we've learned with Gordon and Alfie's form of doubles is they tend to like to come in, hit those wide angles, really kind of make their opponents move. But actually what Martin and Ruben were doing really well, game plan, I don't know whether this was in their game plan or not, but they were keeping Gordon and Alfie back behind the baseline, because you can only hit those drop shots and you can only hit those volleys if you're given the space to do so. And I think what they did is they kind of restricted that space in which they could do that. So it was a very, very clever game plan from Martin and Ruben. And when I spoke to Gordon and Alfie at the end of that final, they were like, we didn't play our sharpest tennis. We didn't play the kind of A game that gets them through, and it just wasn't enough today. And they were full of praise for Martin and Ruben, the game plan they come in with, and how that was a match well played. And I think they were very realistic. You can't win them all.
No.
If somebody could go through with 100% record of never losing, that would be
really quite boring.
Yeah.
So,
but the one thing I know about Alfie and Gordon is, so I used the Paralympics it was meant to be 2020, but it was 2021 in Tokyo. So that year they could play the US Open and the Paralympics at the same time because of the timing shift. And I always, and this is what I reference people to, they lost in that Paralympic doubles final. They won the silver. I don't like to say lost because they still won a silver medal, but they lost that Paralympic doubles final.
Yeah.
And then they came back to the US Open and won the doubles final 6-2, 6-1. I think it was. It was something so dominant that you were like, okay, they weren't going to lose twice in a row. No. So I think they will take from this Wimbledon loss and they will kind of build on it. They're kind of the type of players that will go, right, we've let somebody get through once, let's try and not make it happen again. But they are very realistic, like I say, you can't expect to win them all, and that's kind of their thing as well. And you've got to think that they're the target in the men's open division. The target is let's beat Alfie and Gordon. Let's be the pair that beats Alfie and Gordon. And I think it was I think both of the men's doubles and singles they were the matches that were played on court one. That's why I say I'd like to see all the wheelchair matches, because I think it was a shame that we didn't see a women's match on court one or a quad match. But scheduling meant that it was the men's matches that went on. I think we saw two very high quality finals there that will make people want to come back for more. Yeah.
And it's only a good thing, isn't it? Even if it wasn't played on court one, it's only a good thing that we've made the step from court 16 or court 17 to court 3.
Yeah, I think even 9 years ago, I was sat courtside watching Gordon win his first singles, and I think he was on something like court 14 or something, playing a singles final. So the steps even made in the last 9 years are huge.
Yeah, exactly. If we want to move on to the quad division. Absolutely. So we were talking about we'll start with the doubles actually first. We were talking about Slade and how he made the doubles final of the quad division. It was Sasson and Vink, the number one seeds, versus Ramfidi and Slade. Ramfidi and Slade lost 6-love, 6-2 in a bit of a dominant final.
I see it's not as dominant as the scoreline looks.
Yeah.
There were points. I mean, you've got to look at Vink and Sasson. So at the beginning of the year, Niels and Sam decided not to play together this year and kind of branch out a bit, with the Paralympics over for another sort of 3 years. And since that's happened, Niels and Guy have become like a partnership, and they've been a very successful partnership. I think looking at that scoreline as it is, you would go, it's dominant. If you look at a lot of the games in that, Greg and Donald had game points. They were bringing it to juice, and and the games were quite close. A lot of the games were quite close. I think it was just Niels and Guy had that experience in a Grand Slam final. This was Donald's first Wimbledon doubles final as well. Greg's first Wimbledon doubles final. So there were going to be some nerves there. And I think what was real positive about them too is, they went in as the underdogs and they knew it. When they knew, they were like, we're the underdogs. They admitted it from the start. But I think for them, it was they both got into their first Wimbledon final, and it was enjoy the occasion. Greg's he's quite an old head on young shoulders. He looks at things quite logically. He always has since he's been a teenager. Although he didn't really think logically when he was arranging his accommodation, because he only booked 3 days of accommodation because he thought he was going to be knocked out of the competition. So he confessed to me. He confessed to me when he made the doubles final that he actually now had to sofa surf at his friends. He says it wasn't sofa surfing. He wasn't on a sofa. He did have a bed. But yeah, he was sofa surfing at his friends in order to stay for the final. And I think actually what I really liked about the Donald and Greg partnership, and I told them this, it was in a sport where it's so competitive. Tennis is competitive and it can get really serious quite quickly.
Yeah. Whether
you play it on your feet or in a wheelchair or, with adaptations because you're visually impaired, it's a competitive sport.
Yeah.
It's a one-on-one battle or it's a 2-on-2 battle. They brought joy to the court that just kind of brought a whole new dimension to the quad doubles draw this year. I mean, they were just smiling non-stop. I mean, they were going down, they went down the first set 6-love and they were still smiling and enjoying themselves and living their best life. They just brought this unbridled joy to the whole of the wheelchair draw this year that was just, it was just lovely, and a bit of a, you'd do press with them and it would be quite funny, Donald would say it was because Greg's quite a funny person, and then Greg would be like, no, Donald, but you are funny too. And it was just this, and it's a partnership. I didn't think, I thought Greg was going to play with Andy Lapthorne. That's what I thought, because when he got the wild card, that's what I thought. They'd won the Paralympic silver together. But it didn't happen that way. And actually, I watched their first doubles match, Greg and Donald, and they were just a joy to watch. They were just, even when they were down, they were smiling, they were happy, and it was just such a lovely energy on court. But it was also lovely to see Greg and how he's progressed, because I know when he was 18, he struggled with, should I go to university or should I focus full time on my tennis career?
Yeah.
And he went down the tennis road because he didn't want to think, what if? He didn't want to think, what if I had just pursued the tennis? What might happen? And I think with Greg as well, a lot of the top players have known he's been knocking on the door. They know he's been there. They know he's been a threat, but he's never quite got over the line to be there. And then suddenly in this Wimbledon, he's made a lot of, and actually beforehand in Roehampton, when he lost against Sam, but he took him to 3 sets. It's made a lot of the top guys sit up and listen and really take notice of Greg and the damage that he can do. And what's really exciting about Greg, he hated the grass. When he played Wimbledon in 2023, he really wasn't a big fan of it. But now when you talk to him, he's like, do you know, actually, I think I've got the game that suits it and I quite actually like it. Yeah. It's really, really, it's really grown on me, is what he said. So, and what's really interesting, him as a player, you see these players that, you know, just kind of burst onto the scene and then just immediately good and immediately get into the kind of top 10. Greg hasn't done that. He's made small gains. He's been patient. He's worked hard to get where he is now. You know, he will admit, he says, you know, I'm not one of these people that can just whack a ball down the court and kind of find myself in the top 5. I've had to work at it. You know, but actually what's really interesting about Greg, I mean, we may find he becomes a brilliant grass court player, but previously to this Wimbledon, he has a really strong hard court game, and obviously he's qualified for the US Open, and they are hard courts. So he's you know, he has a really, really strong hard court game. So he'll be a really interesting watch in New York.
Yeah, and we'll get on to the New York in a second, but we'll cover the last wheelchair quad match that happened at Wimbledon this year, which was the men's quad final between Vink and Schroeder. Obviously Schroeder we were talking about earlier, but yeah, just the first versus second seed and Vink coming out on top 6-3, 6-3.
Yeah, I've just the quad division is a mixed division. It's just that it's only men that are high enough ranked to qualify for the slams at the minute. So women do play in the quad division. It's a mixed division. So I make that point for the girls.
Apologies.
It is just because we see 2 men in the final doesn't mean it doesn't include women. I do get asked that question a lot, like where are the female quads, and I'm like, not high enough ranked. But that's a discussion for another day. It's the kind of, again, a bit like Alfie and Tokito. We're kind of used to seeing Niels versus Sam now. It's kind of a thing. Guy Sasson has come in recently, and sometimes it mixes it up and we see a Guy versus Niels final or a Guy versus Sam's final. So we've seen things mixed up a bit, but still it's kind of the traditional quad division final. And there's something about Niels on grass this season. He's been dangerous. So I had a feeling when I saw this final matchup, I thought if Sam can't get on the front foot in the first set, Niels could easily kind of, to use a really bad term, wheel away with this, because Niels on grass this year. I mean, he's had frustrations. He's another player who's had frustrations on grass before, you know, getting grumpy at himself. But the way Niels has played through this grass court season has been phenomenal. And I think for him to lift that Wimbledon singles title at the end of the grass court season felt like, you know, yes, that was the right result. And, you know, unfortunately, Sam didn't manage to get on the front foot from the start, and Niels kind of, the momentum really just started with Niels and stayed with Niels. And Niels knew everything, but that's the problem, isn't it? We have it with Gordon and Alfie when we play in Britain. When you're a fellow countryman and they don't train together actually, but they've played a lot of doubles together, they know each other's games quite well, so you know how to do damage to your kind of opponent, and you know what they're gonna kind of maybe bring. Anticipate it a bit more. Obviously you're always going to bring new things because you're aware of that as a tennis player, that you kind of compatriot knows what's your game a lot better than a lot of other people. But yeah, no, Niels just had that, and it was a brilliant final to watch. Yes, it was quite one-sided. It was a brilliant final to watch because you just saw the athleticism of both Sam and Niels actually. You saw Sam trying to fight to get into this game, while Niels just kept asking the questions, and it was just the fact that on this day at that time, Sam just couldn't find the answers.
You were talking about earlier about how you were saying that how there was no doubles tennis in New York at the US Open last year, but due to the Paralympics. But now we see New Year, and we have it back at the US Open this year. How good is that for the sport?
That's good. I do think there should be a way that we can find out. You know, you don't ask the standing players to miss the US. You don't ask you don't ask the standing players to miss the US Open because they're competing in the Olympics.
No,
so why are you asking the wheelchair players? Because my argument is the wheelchair players are professional players of the Paralympic sports. The wheelchair tennis is the one that's really built up a professional tour. And so there needs, I do think, whatever happens, we need to look at this and we need to find a way where, you know, in 2021 it could happen, but that's because they had to move the Paralympics because of humidity and stuff in Tokyo and competing in typhoon season. There has to be a way. It can't be every 4 years we just don't see wheelchair tennis at the US Open. You just can't. It can't continue like that. It's not fair on the players who are professionals. You know, you've got to think when they compete for their country, which is a great honor for all of them. Then you know, what prize money are they losing? From not competing. I mean, the US Open did step in this time round, and they did offer prize money so that those players that would have competed at the US Open last year, they got prize money comparable. So that is kind of a step forward, but I don't know whether it's the solution of just saying, oh, well, you're not here and we'll pay you the prize money anyway. Just, you know, just go off and do the Paralympics. I don't know. I don't think that's the solution that's fair. I think there are 4 Grand Slams in the year, and every year we should see wheelchair tennis at all of them. But we will have it back this year. The controversial US Open with the mixed doubles.
We're not here to talk about that.
And it will be great to see. I think the real kick into the US Open and people watching wheelchair tennis will come after LA 2028. I think we're probably going to stay where we are at the minute with the US Open and crowds and stuff like that, because as well with like Dana Mathewson having retired, and we haven't seen David Wagner in a number of the slams. We should, based on his ranking currently, see him in the US Open, but that obviously all depends what happens to rankings over the next sort of few weeks. There's not that there's not that kind of you know how we have the British player base in Britain for Wimbledon. They actually invite a lot of their French players at Roland Garros to play. The Aussies go absolutely crazy over wheelchair tennis, and that's been a lot to do with the legacy of Dylan Alcott. The American audience hasn't quite, I don't think,
grasped it yet.
Yes, got onto it. So I have hope that like after LA 2028, we'll be talking about people coming to watch it. I think it's a lot slower in the USA. I don't think like people who watch Wimbledon will have seen that #1 court crowd for Alfie and Tokito's final with 10,000 people in it. The other thing we've got to understand with American stadiums, and you know, I was in an event with Billie Jean King the week before Wimbledon, and she said she loved the intimacy of the Wimbledon stadiums because everywhere you go in America, everything's big.
Yeah, it's huge.
And so if you compare court #1 and centre court to say Arthur Ashe, you know, how many centre courts could you fit inside Arthur Ashe? It's built like a proper American sports stadium. So I think when they put, but the US Open, to be fair to them, they do put wheelchair tennis on the likes of Louis Armstrong and the larger courts as well. They start their draws on the outer courts. And then kind of once it gets to finals weekend. So they are doing everything right in that they're
following procedure in a sense of like how they do it.
We need to get that audience appetite over there in America. And you know, Dana Mathewson did great things for that. I thought it was, you know, the stuff she did and the stuff she's still doing now, even though she's retired, you know, she's working a lot at the grassroots level of the game, encouraging more people to play tennis as well. They worked hard, but it's been like an uphill struggle in America. They don't seem to kind of jump on that bandwagon as easily as we do in Europe or they do in Australia. So I'm hoping I'm wrong, and I'm hoping like I get out to the US Open and we've got like courts full. We get courts full. Like I'd love to come back and say to you, oh my goodness, like Louis Armstrong was absolutely jam packed.
Was packed, yeah.
But and the person who would love to have a perfect crystal ball is saying that to you. I'd love to go this year and find that every wheelchair match is packed. We've got the crap. Wimbledon, what you've just witnessed in Wimbledon with the wheelchair tennis is not something, as Alfie said in his speech, is not something they see every week on tour.
Often. Yeah.
It's often. So that's why I say, with my hopeful crystal ball, I'd love to say, in 2 months' time, I'm going to come back to you and say, oh my God, it was amazing. There were so many people engaged with wheelchair tennis. With the realistic crystal ball, I think it's if it's going to be something that kickstarts the interest more in, and this is not just in wheelchair tennis, this is in Paralympic sport as a whole, in any form of disability sport as a whole, it's going to be those games in LA 2028.
Yeah. Well, and you'd think so, because it's the biggest. Well, in most sports, it's the pinnacle of your sport, as in Paralympic or even like Olympic or Paralympic games. It's the best, or I don't know. In some sports, it's the highest you can go. And hopefully, when we get over to the US and we have these games, people will buy the tickets. They'll come watch. They'll get excited. And American crowds can be great. And
I can't wait for it. I want to see hot dogs. When you go to a baseball game at America and they're like, oh yeah, pay $10 and you get as many hot dogs and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I can't wait for that. And that's not because I want to eat as many hot dogs. I have Crohn's disease. I can't eat as many hot dogs as I like. But that atmosphere where it's an event.
It's a huge event.
The US seems to make sport an event, and you see it at the US Open. It's an event. They have little areas where people can eat and just kind of meet up, and I love New York for that. I love the US Open for that, because it feels so, I don't want to say quintessentially American, but it does, because they've turned it into an event. And it's why it's people sat by the court side with a beer in their hand, and that's what I want to see it turn into, when we have the wheelchair tennis there. Because actually, when you look at it, they might not have the crowds for the wheelchair tennis, but the US Open have done what the Aussie Open did, which is make all the draws equal: 16 men, 16 women, 16 quads. Wimbledon and Roland Garros still have to catch up on that. So it's not held. What's interesting to say is this: they only have the wheelchair tennis players 3 out of 4 years, but it's not held them back on advancing. They maybe don't get the crowds that the standing players get, but it hasn't held them back on advancing the game and making it equal. So it just, to me, it's such a shame that it's not as engaged with as it is, because even when you go to Roland Garros, the French crowds are noisy. If I'm following a British player and they're playing a French player, it's going to be loud. They're going to bring the atmosphere. I think it's the LA Games that's going to push it. I hope it's before.
Absolutely. And finally, I just have one more thing to cover. You talked to our producer John a while back about how at last year's Wimbledon, the press conferences for the wheelchair matches were not covered nearly as much as they should have been. This year, has anything changed? Is it an upturn in how many journalists we have in the room?
I think it's a mixed bag. So I think with the men's division, because of the stages they've been given, I think we're seeing a lot more press. It does depend if they lose, which, for when Alfie and Gordon lost that doubles final, it was me and one other journalist in. When Alfie lost the singles final, it was me and one other journalist, which wouldn't actually happen if it was a standing player. There would be still a room full of journalists. But there were improvements. There was more interest in it. There was more stuff done with it. I think the women and quads division, it frustrates me as a woman in sport that journalists do not turn up for the women. And I'm going to say that. Like, the women's game right now in wheelchair tennis, how we've got, because Dida is on her comeback, So I still maintain Dida is going to be world number one within the next 12 months again. She's just got to find a game again. I mean, when I spoke to her, I was like, I spoke to her like just generally, and she's like, oh, I keep doing it in practice. It's just not happening in matches at the minute.
Yeah.
Within the next 12 months, we're going to see Dida back at world number one, where she was. But just as we're talking about the women's game at Wimbledon, where we've had so many different champions over so many different Grand Slams, the women's game now, especially with the introduction of those Chinese women really they're pushing the game forward. The women's game in wheelchair tennis is so varied and so trailblazing at the minute of the way the women are finding to win matches and stuff and how their game's developing. I feel the media's missing something, and it's it's the age-old thing, the women in sport thing. It's not a specific wheelchair tennis thing. It's it's a women in sport thing. And I just feel that they don't give enough time to the women's wheelchair players, and I feel that they need to start. Because, the story about Ksenia and how she's kind of come into her first Wimbledon, that's a really nice story. Yeah. And how quickly she's done it. How quickly she's got herself in those positions because of the type of player she is. We miss so many women's stories out of wheelchair tennis, and I would love to see more of those stories told, because we need more women and girls playing wheelchair tennis, and how are we going to get more women and girls believing they can play wheelchair tennis? Well, we need to show them. We need to show their matches. We need to have their matches on the main channel as well as the men's matches, and equally for the quad division, we need to see more of those athletes with a higher level of disability competing in wheelchair tennis. Because if I'm somebody with a high level of disability and I see Gordon and Alfie play, or I see Dida and Yui play, I go, oh, well, I can't play wheelchair tennis because I never beat them. Yeah. I think for me, it's about evening out the media coverage now. Yeah. It's great that, and I love them for it. This is not a criticism upon the men. It is what they have done and how their matches have kind of now put it on the map. But it's now the media's job. It's not the players' job. Yeah. To start looking at the other divisions. Yeah, it's not the women's job to go out there and say, look, we need to be covered more, because that's not their job. It's the media that need to come and cover their matches. They need to be covering all the matches possible. And this isn't just for, this isn't just for them. This is for everyone in tennis, especially. Everyone needs to get similar media coverage. I was at Roland Garros earlier this year, and that debate over why there are no women's matches scheduled in the night time at Roland Garros was a massive debate. That for me is ridiculous. If you looked at some of the women's matches at Roland Garros, but if you looked at some of the women's matches here at Wimbledon, just gone, they were lasting longer than the men's. I think it's a whole. I think in a way tennis does it better than a lot of places, but I think that's because we've had the likes of Billie Jean King knock the door down and refuse to put it back up again until it is equal, basically. And she's still doing the fight. And so I think, and the likes of Judy Murray, who's done brilliant things for coaching for women in this country. I think we've got some incredibly, some might say gobby, but I think passionate women who want to make the sport better and want to make it as equal as it humanly possibly can be. And that's the thing, actually. When Wimbledon introduced wheelchair singles, they introduced equal prize money for everybody. So men and women. Quads was introduced later, but it was still equal prize money. So we're not doing that fight anymore. We're not doing that fight's gone. The fight is with the editors and the people who make the decisions, who seem to think that and bad needing the coverage, even if a woman's match has been more competitive, more, more entertaining, a man needing the coverage has to be the norm. I think we really need to ask ourselves questions. I mean, I saw a headline and it's the way it's covered as well. I mean, it was the Iga Swiatek Anisimova final. And it was like, they'd use words like violent dismantling and to describe that match. And I'm like, no, look at it. Iga played perfect tennis. It was intelligent tennis. It was perfect. Why can't you just say that? Anisimova, it was the occasion. It was, do you know what? 70%, 80% of tennis is your mental game. Yeah. And to walk out on that centre court for a final for the first time, it's got to play with things. But Iga played the perfect game.
Yeah, she did.
So why are we talking about violence? Why are we talking about? It's even the words that's used around the women's game, whether that's been standing or in a wheelchair or VI. Sometimes it's the language that's used as well, and it just doesn't. Yeah, I think we need to do better. I think we need to just remember that media. We do need to remember that women play the sport, and actually, I asked them to look at. Emma Raducanu, I'm in a very privileged position in that I do this job, but then I also coach, and I coach at grassroots level. And I saw the impact. Do you remember when Emma Raducanu won the US Open? And a channel over here, was it Channel 4 over here, bought the rights to play that final?
Yeah, to play the final, yeah.
Well, the money from those, the money that was made went to a girls' program here in Britain to encourage more girls and women to take up the sport. And the uptake of girls at grassroots level is far more because they've seen Emma Raducanu on that stage.
Yeah.
Because they've seen them. They've seen what they could be. And she was a teenager. So to like a 5-6-year-old, she's still like, she's not an old woman. She's like, she's still a teenager. It's like, oh, actually, in 10 years' time, if I practice my tennis, I could be there. Yeah. You don't kind of dull that down with it's like one in a million chance of being there, but we don't tell them that then. Yeah, we don't tell them that young, no. But it's the aspiration showing that match, and I think I hold up that match to people and say, look, that somebody gave that match a chance, and it was a women's match, and they played it on. Yes, okay, it's normally behind a paywall, but they played it on television where everybody could see it.
It was on a couple channels, I remember as well. Yeah, it'd been bought out by a couple. I think Channel 4, and I think there was one other as well. Because they saw that this was such a huge, such a huge opportunity for British women's tennis. I mean, been waiting. I mean, before Raducanu, it was Sue Barker was, and that was in what? You're testing me now. I want to say
it was a long time before, but we had like Laura Robson and Heather Watson and stuff like
obviously,
that.
But no one has got over the hump of actually winning the slam.
Yeah,
that was such a monumental moment for British women's tennis, and look at the upturn now. We, as you were talking about, we have such a the grassroots game is really there, and if you don't have the role model and you don't have that crowning moment of getting people into the sport and you can't cover it, if we had a British women's wheelchair player and she was at Wimbledon, even if she made the Wimbledon wheelchair final, she needs to have the coverage. Otherwise, how do you expect young women in Britain to get into wheelchair tennis? It's just all about media coverage and bringing that forward into the spotlight so we have more players available.
Yeah, no, and like I say, I will never stop saying well done to the likes of Alfie, Gordon, Tokito, Martin, Danny, all of those guys for kind of the gusty, the competitiveness of their matches. But it's just the automatic pilot of let's do the men's first and let the women catch up. It's just like when the thing is, wheelchair tennis is coming into its own in the 2000s. when the world is in a different place as to, you know, 1800 when we had somewhere in the 1800s we had the first when there's a different equality in society. So why are we still working to the men go first and then the women follow? And you know, and I never do down, you know, any form of the game that is showing that competitive level and is being seen on big courts and big screens. They're bringing awareness to the sport as a whole.
Yes.
But I argue that wheelchair tennis has had a lot of its development in the 2000s when the world is a different place for men and women, and we're more equal in loads of parts of society. We're still not equal in every part of society. So why are we not then seeing the media coverage grow in an equal way?
Yeah.
You know, why have we got a whole rundown of a men's match and like 2 lines about what happened in the women's match? Like and I especially think it's interesting. The women's game in wheelchair tennis, trust me, the US Open is going to be interesting. That women's draw, really interesting. You've got Dida, who's now she's now. I mean, this is weird. This is like 2 slams where we haven't had Dida in a final, and I have a feeling she's going to come back and she might scare a few people at the US Open. I've got not a horrible feeling, because I'd love to see Dida performing to where she knows she can again. You've got Dida, you've got Anique, you've got Yui, but you've got Lee, and you've got Wong, and you've got Sue, and you've got KG Monchane, who I think's an awesome player. You look at the variation of this women's game right now in wheelchair tennis, and it needs to be watched. Like, these matches need to be watched.
Gemma, thank you so much. It's been an absolute privilege to have this time to talk to you about the whole of Wimbledon and the whole of wheelchair tennis. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Thank you everyone that tuned in to join us. And yeah, we have lots of stuff coming up. I believe Damien is doing a watch along for Kazuo very later today, so join us for that. But Gemma, thank you so much. It was so lovely to talk to you, and we will see you all very soon.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.